Okay, this is going to be a phenomenal episode. This is one you do not want to miss. I had an incredible conversation with this gentleman. He's actually in the Muscular Gentleman program, but not only that, but he is an expert in his field. He's a licensed massage therapist, a mindfulness coach, a Reiki master. He explores in group classes, he explores masculinity, which is a major plus for the type of conversations that I want to have. But also, more importantly, one of the biggest reasons I have him on this show is he is a breathwork facilitator. And this is a very interesting, very unique practice that I want everybody to be aware of as something to help them level up. And we know in the Muscular Gentleman, anything I can do to bring you something that will help you become better in your life and improve your journey. I'm going to try to get it on the show. So that's what I did here today. This man, his name is Nate Ewert, and he is a colleague, a friend, and I actually get the opportunity and the honor of coaching him in the Muscular Gentleman program, which is amazing. So without further ado, let's jump in, and we're going to teach you all sorts of amazing things. But he's a breathwork facilitator, and he is going to deep dive into what that looks like. But also, this is so huge for the Muscular Gentleman and the masculinity side of men in the way that we can live more in the present. And if you can dial in on a practice like this, not only can you become more present in your daily life, but his facilitating of breathwork is really cool because it's going to help you move through trauma and things like that. So without further ado, let's jump in. Welcome, Nate, here.
Welcome to the Muscular Gentleman. Where we don't apologize for being men. Masculinity, sex, fitness, and attraction. Helping men reclaim their masculine edge, improve their sex life, get the body they've always wanted, and master their mindset to build a life worth living. This is the Muscular Gentleman. And now your host, Rustin Webb.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Rustin Webb here. This is another awesome podcast that I am excited to jump into. I have a guest here, Nate Ewert. I'm going to let him tell his story a little bit. But he is a breathwork expert, and he works with men, helping them using breathwork to help them with their trauma, from kind of a high overview of that, and does a lot more. But what's cool about Nate is he's actually a Muscular Gentleman. So he is in the men's program and brings it every week and does phenomenal work and has had some massive shifts. So I'll let him talk about that too. But I am really excited to have him on the show. We have gotten into some incredible conversations on masculinity, attraction, sex, you name it. So this is going to be a fun talk. So without further ado, Nate Ewert, tell us a little bit tell us more about what you do, not just what I said.
Cool. Well, thanks. And I feel very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Nate Ewert. I own a company called Somatic Synergies Integrated Healing. And I've been, it's October will be 10 years that I'll have been in business. And my main mission was to find a place where I can provide safety and help people know that they matter and that they're safe to heal. And I started as a bodyworker 20 years ago, and went through, a lot of different shifts and changing. I taught that for a while, did some curriculum work. I've done, probably every certification in the bodywork realm that there is for, different forms of massage, and healing and energy work and all of that. And really the last 10 years, 10 years ago, I hit kind of a rock bottom in my life and started the business and started on this journey of healing myself and my own traumas. And that's when I started studying mindfulness. So a lot of spiritual healing practices, some shamanism, and about 6 or 7 years ago, I did breathwork for the first time. And as soon as I was able to learn it, to become a facilitator for it, I jumped on the opportunity because it became such a huge catalyst for me to heal a lot of my stuff and create a lot of awareness and healing and just really allowed me to show up in a different way for my family, for my clients, for everybody that I came into contact with. And so it sort of became this glue that bound everything else that I do and provide for my clients and myself together. So it's been a really amazing process using all of it. And so now in my practice, I use breathwork, I use mindfulness, I use these body practices with clients, and it's really about healing trauma and healing all of those parts of the mind where we get out of choice, where we feel like we have no choice. And so being able to give choice back to people that feel like they don't have it. So that's awesome. A nutshell.
No, that's good. No, so this is good. You said a couple things there that I want to touch on. So one of the things you said is a safe place. And, look, this is all about men leveling up. That's what the Muscular Gentleman is all about. So it's interesting, though, because we hear in society and this safety to heal, this safety to be ourselves. And, men have taken quite a hit over the last several decades as far as, pushing men to be tough, men don't cry and all these different things. And it's very, it's counterintuitive because men have to heal too, right? We've like, for me personally, I have trauma from my father who showed toxic masculinity, weak masculinity. He was a narcissist. He was abusive. I know you have some similar background with this too, but I didn't have a safe place. I experienced all sorts of trauma, and then I didn't really know where to find that healing, other than the journey I've taken now. But like, do you mind speaking on that a little bit about like the safety side of this? Because there's so many men, I think they're even unsafe in their own mind, right? To believe that they should even address some of this stuff, because they're afraid they're going to be like they're not tough. Like, it's like the ego might be speaking to them or whatever it is, but they're being held back either in their own mind or society is keeping them from that space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's funny that this is going this direction. As I was thinking about what we were going to talk about and all that, I'm like, I think we should talk about purpose. And your question about this safe space is actually exactly what that was for me. I did a bunch of purpose work several years ago, and looking at some of the darkest moments of my life and some of the brightest moments of my life and what those have in common. And what I realized is in my darkest moments, I didn't feel safe. And that kind of became, one of the main negative self-talks or pieces that my mind would come to whenever I would start getting into stressful situations. And I would find myself choosing from this place of fear and unsafety. And then in my brightest moments, I always felt like I mattered, whenever I got this promotion or, finished some class, or somebody, gave me some compliment about the work that I helped them achieve or something. There was always this sense of pride of like, oh, wow, what I did really mattered. And so when I couple those two things together of, this darkest moment of not feeling safe and these brightest moments of feeling like I mattered, I realized like, wow, that's really part of my purpose is creating this safe space for people to know that they matter and that they're safe to heal. And it's sacred and it's protected. And in a lot of the ceremonial work that I've done with the shamanic training I've had and with the breathwork training I've had, it's about creating what that safe space is. And it can look like a lot of different things, but it's this container of non-judgment, of unconditional expression, of love, of it's okay to have whatever's going on inside of you, and to be able to be there for somebody in a way that it's just allowance. It's allowance of whatever's there, whatever's alive in them, and being able to hold that for them as they're expressing, as they're releasing, as we go into these really dark places within self, it's really scary. And to have somebody there with you to say, hey, it's okay, whatever's going on in your mind, whatever you're feeling, whatever crazy thoughts they are, whatever that darkness is in there, it's okay. It's part of the human experience, and you're okay to express it. You're safe to allow it to come up and look at it and actually see what's behind it, because there's always a gift behind it. But it feels like the worst possible thing in your life. It feels like the most judgment, the most shame.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing when we actually look at that, and so it always feels very unsafe when we start to uncover these patterns of self, right? Whenever we want to make changes in any choice pattern, behavior pattern, anything like that, we have to look at the driving force behind it, and that's where it gets scary, and that's where we need to feel safe to feel unsafe.
Yeah. So, it's funny as you're speaking to all this, I'm literally just playing in my head all these, I think, thoughts that roll into men's minds as far as, going to these places in our minds and our hearts. You feel unsafe too from, I think, social media, the judgment of others. Like, I've done breath work with you twice now. What's nice is knowing how non-judgmental that space is with you. And that can be different, right, with other breath work. I don't know from that experience, but I know that there is this scary moment, working in that space of doing the breath work, of feeling judged. And it could just be our own internal language and judgment that's coming out of that space. But it is kind of scary to like have to, what's going to reveal itself. So before I keep talking about this with you, let's break down a little bit what breath work looks like, because I think people listening or watching this are going to be like, what are they talking about? So like, let's dive into breath work, because it might sound confusing. I want to speak really quickly from my end, being on the other end of the therapy. This is not some voodooistic, like crazy, over hippie, there's no chanting and weird. It's not anything awkward or strange. Like most men that listen to this show, look, we're masculine men. We want to lift weights. We want to improve our lives. We want to be better. And so sometimes we see these different therapies out there, and it might kind of, I don't know, freak us out. This is legit, man. This is amazing therapy that I think everyone should experience. I mean, everyone. So to talk a little bit about it, so guys don't go down this road in their mind that you said shaman, and it's like immediately people start thinking like peyote and pipes and who knows, right? So talk to us about that.
So breathwork, I mean, it's a big umbrella of a lot of different techniques. There's on kind of the lighter end of it, there's the, pranayama from yoga, right? That's the breathing practice that's part of the yoga practices. There's, Wim Hof is a really big name in the breathwork community now, the Iceman, right? He does these quick, rapid breath patterns for 30 seconds and then breath holds and then cold exposure. And he's tough, and he climbed Mount Everest with no supplemental oxygen, I think in shorts twice, right?
Right.
Very powerful practice that this guy has. It's funny you mentioned like, peyote and shamanism. So a lot of the breathwork practices that are being used now, started really getting popularity in the 60s when psychedelics were outlawed. So there were all these therapists that were doing very powerful therapeutic work for addiction and depression and all of these things with psychedelics, but then it became illegal. And so they started transitioning into this, using these forms of breath work to kind of create some of those altered consciousness states where people could take a look at their own stuff. And so one of the biggest ones is called holotropic breathing. And that's kind of the biggest, most aggressive form of it. And then there's rebirthing breath, which is another big altered consciousness state one. And then shamanic breath work is another one, which is it's very similar in practice to the rebirthing breath, but the container's a little different. And so with each of them, the container's a little different, the duration's a little different. That the breath is a little different. With holotropic, it's more of a hyperventilation. So it's an active inhale and an active exhale all through the mouth. With rebirthing breath, which is the one I was trained in, and I have experience with all of them. But the one I come back to and teach the most is it's based on the rebirthing breath, which is an active inhale and a passive exhale. So it's not a hyperventilation. Shamanic breathing, again, is very similar, but the container is different. By container, I just mean the space that's being held around it. maybe somebody will be burning some sage, or the music might be different. There might be drumming or something in shamanic breathwork. So those are kind of the biggest ones, and those are the ones I use when I teach classes, when I do men's groups. I do individual sessions with that as well, typically coupled with body work and stuff. And what it does is it creates this charge in the system. So we can look at this from a couple different lenses, right? You can look at it through the physical lens and the physiological lens of, like, we're hyperoxygenating the system. This is one. These are about hyperoxygenation. There's also some breathwork practices that are about hypooxygenation, where we do extended breath holds to create different levels of oxygen, right? But in the one I use, it's all about creating more oxygen. And as your body oxygenates, all of the, like, you drop into this state of presence that I've never experienced any other way, to be honest. I mean, I've meditated for years, and I mean, presence is my number one value. It's the first part in the process I take all of my clients through. And it's funny, because I've been talking about presence for years and years and years, until I started this practice of breathwork. I had no idea what that really meant. And so we gain this sensation, this presence in the system because of this hyperoxygenation. And we start to get all sorts of sensations. We can have tingling, and our temperature can go up and down. We can have, old chronic pains can kind of show up and heal. Some people get feel like you're being lifted up off the ground, or being pressed into the ground, like you're really heavy. And all of it is about, putting you into this state to heal something, to heal whatever's happening in there. Emotions become very fluid, if you will. I mean, it's very common that people might have something like laughter or sadness come up, or fear or anger. I mean, I think pretty much every group I have, somebody's pounding their fist in anger, somebody's crying, somebody's, maybe having an orgasm energetically or something,
Have you had that?
I mean, not to speak to, I always ask for confidentiality in sessions,
sure.
But yeah, all of these things are possible. And yes, I've witnessed some really amazing openings and releases. And so when we talk about the space of non-judgment, of safety, you never know what's going to show up. Yeah. And what I've learned to trust about the breath is you can always trust it. It's your breath. You can't like over breathe yourself.
Sure.
And so if something is coming up for you, it's because you're ready to see it, you're ready to look at it, you're ready to feel it. And it'll never push you too far. It'll never push you over that edge and make you fall on your face.
Now, I got to say this, because we have men that could be listening to the show, for the first time or whatever. And, we're talking about this breathing, and most, here's the thing. And this, look, I've been, in the health and wellness space for so long too, that I can speak to this pretty candidly. Most people have no awareness of their breath. I mean, they go through life, and it's on autopilot, right? Mm-hmm. And so what's really cool about this, and you're speaking to the lens that I love the most, which is the physiological side, because it's just, it's where I come from. So, but the physiological response, what's so interesting though, is it pulls you into an awareness space that you really can't ignore. And it's interesting because it's almost, it sounds weird, but it's almost beyond physiological now, because we're dealing with the heart and the soul, and being in that present moment, like you were speaking to. I love that, because as a muscular gentleman, as a man who wants to be more masculine, I think that is one of the biggest areas for men to start working on immediately. If you want to be more masculine, learn to be in the present, right? And then once you're in the present, address the things that are blocking you from being more masculine, because there are things throughout our life, and trauma is one of them, that I truly believe halts, or kind of maybe either halts, stagnates, or maybe even just completely stops our masculine growth from being boys, into that manhood. And this is such a good way. I think it's a great tool, breath work, to move past that. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. I mean, it's I've experienced that in my life and my practice with it. I've seen it happen over and over and over again with clients and groups, and it is this way to push through barriers, blocks, gain clarity. When we talk about sort of some of the masculine ideals, it's like masculinity is presence, right? It is that presence and awareness of what is happening right now. It's like I can't be reactive.
Yeah.
If I'm truly in presence, right? And we talk about being that oak tree. We talk about, like it's okay to be emotional, or to have emotions, but being reactive to our emotions is not a masculine ideal. And this allows us, what I've found with breathwork is it allows you to be present with whatever's alive in you and not have to be reactive, to be able to witness your own processes and then choose what you want to do. I love this idea of like bringing ourselves back to choice instead of reactivity.
Yeah. So Nate was talking about an oak tree. This is something that we use as a metaphor within the Muscular Gentleman online men's program. The oak tree is just this symbol of sturdiness and strength. The oak tree can withstand incredible storms and not move. It'll sway through the storm, but it'll survive, no problem. And so for that masculine man, it's something that we kind of hold on to, is that ability to withstand the storm. And a lot of times that's the feminine energy. Nothing negative about it. We're not dogging on feminine energy or saying that it's bad in any way. In fact, it's 100% necessary. And it's what makes life so beautiful. But as a man, we have to show up as that oak tree, as that stable, grounded man. And that's what he's saying this is so good, Nate. What you're saying is, in order for me to be that oak tree, I have to be in the present, right? Yeah. As soon as I leave the present moment, I'm in a reactive state of some kind, right? And so that's what's creating the issue. Give us a little bit of framework on what your breath work looks like, maybe from a high level standpoint. Like if I came to you and I was like, all right, Nate, sign me up for some breath work. What am I doing? Maybe just like kind of a broad. And again, nobody should do this without like this. This is incredible work, but you don't just do this on your own, talk to us about that.
So, as I mentioned, it's the practice I teach. It's more using an active inhale and a passive exhale. So you're pulling this inhale in, and you're just allowing your exhale to fall out. And there's many forms of this practice out there, and whether it's in through the nose or out through the mouth, or in through the mouth and out through the mouth, or all through the nose, like depending on who you talk to and what way they've been initiated into this work, like they might use different patterns of that. The practice I use is all through the mouth when we do our big breath work.
What made you
groups and healing? It's the one that I had the most experience with, and in practicing a lot of the different forms of it out there, this is the one I've found that I found my body like falls into this one really naturally. Like I don't have to force it. I mean, I've even like woken up in the middle of the night and realized like my body was kind of in this process. And so I really feel like this is the one that kind of is the most natural, that the body just falls into the easiest. And so that's one of the reasons why I like this one. It's also, it does push you, and it does. And part of that masculine edge, right, is leaning just over that edge. And so it does allow you to kind of push a little bit and build that charge up a little more. And so, the practice itself is depending on how long the container is that we're using, we might be pulling that breath for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. When I do the bigger classes, it's 35 to 40 minutes where we're actively engaging in this breath. And then another 30 to 40 minutes afterward, we let the breath relax, and you just sort of fall into this state of stillness. Sometimes the mind is going. Sometimes you feel like, you've kind of fallen into a really beautiful nap space, or, sometimes people say they journey. They're like, wow, I don't know where I went, but it was really peaceful. I like to think of it as, after a while of doing this, that second half for me, a lot of times, is kind of staring into the void, which I love. I've talked about.
Hold on. What? Talk to me more about this. What does that mean? Like,
the void, right? Being a long-time meditator, there's this state of kind of flow where you get into, where the thoughts sort of slow down and stop. And I want to layer a couple things over this,
Okay.
This explanation. So one of the things I've found in some of the research I've done and reading I've done with masculinity, it's like we all as men, are looking for this time when we can just shut off. Right. It's like, I'm gonna check all the boxes so I can just sit down and not have to think, not have to do anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
like a reset.
And that's kind of how I find that space of staring into the void, where it's like, in my mind, it's black. There's nothing. Maybe I even feel like I'm floating, but it's like, there's no thoughts coming in. There's no to-do list going. Right. There's nothing to really like look at or needs my attention, or it's just, I get to just be in this space. And I love it. I think there was a time when I was really anxious. That was one of the things that I think I've kind of healed in my breathwork practice, is this anxiety. But it used to scare me. Like I'd hit this spot and it'd be so still, and just peaceful, and fear would come up, and eventually this fear kind of worked its way out. And like I said, now I love it. And staring into the void is kind of the only way I can explain it. Yeah. Of just. It's free, it's peaceful, it's quiet, there's nothing to take attention.
Was there like a fear of like, I shouldn't even be having this moment to myself? Like a fear of like, do I even deserve this kind of space to be able to enjoy, or what?
Maybe, the non-deserving was never really one of my negative self-talk pieces.
That's one of mine.
Yeah. So, but I will say, I think, some of mine of safety was a big one, and not good enough was one for me a lot that I've struggled with like anytime stress comes up, it's always that, I'm not good enough to actually be able to do this.
I get that.
And so it's not so much about deserving. I mean, I guess that's just semantics, right? It's like, but that's the thing for me. It's like, here's another example of how I'm not good enough, right? But so that, I think that piece is in it. The anxiety for me, though, was always just about taking myself out of the present moment, right? It was either worrying about something that might happen, or being hurt about something that did happen, and not allowing myself to be in that present moment. Once I finally allowed myself to just surrender to that moment of like, oh no, it's just still here. There's nothing that needs my attention, and it's glorious.
That's cool. So let me ask you this. Look, as men, that are trying to level up, we're trying to do, we're trying to live life on just like we've talked about, you and I, a higher thermostat, right? We want to set that thermostat all the way and just live life full tilt. Leave it all out there. So there's only so much time in a day. And, everyone that I feel like in the last 10 years, maybe just 5 years, this big buzzword of like, what's your morning routine, and what's your, daily practices that keep you moving forward. And, there's reading and meditating, and there's breath work, there's cold showers, there's all these different options out there. Right. And there's not one right way, but just from your perspective, if I was going to pick meditation versus some breath work, what would you, do you feel like it's a replacement? I mean, obviously they can both have totally different features, but like, what's your take on that? Like for somebody who's trying to optimize their life?
Well, I think breathwork is a form of meditation. So even if I'm not going to actively engage in the breath in the way of the rebirthing breath, like if I sit and meditate, like I still use the breath as my focal point.
Sure.
So whether it's just paying attention to my breath, or counting breaths, or maybe I'm, counting a 4-second inhale, a 7-second hold, and an 8-second exhale, or, there's all these different practices that what I love about the breath for any sort of meditation or focal point is like, you can't breathe 5 minutes ago. I can't breathe tomorrow. So if you're doing anything where you're focusing on the breath, you're bringing yourself into the present moment. And I think that's really important.
So that is so it's funny. I do Wim Hof before I jump into the cold. I literally found I cannot get into a cold shower without doing the breath work first. I just physiologically cannot do it. And so I'll do his breath work. I can't really meditate. I guess you could say I'm in the present moment because I'm sitting there having to do the work.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's a form of meditation. It's almost like a stressful form of meditation, but I'm purposely stressing my body in this cold water because I want that response to create resiliency, you know, and things like that. But breath work in and of itself, what kind of breath work do you do from a meditation standpoint that's different than the breath work you teach for trauma? Because obviously you wouldn't want to do that by yourself, what you teach.
Yeah. So, well, the one I just mentioned, so doing a 4-second inhale, a 7-second hold, and then an 8-second exhale, is actually really good to calm the nervous system. Okay. So, and that can all be done through the nose or, you know, through the mouth, whatever's most comfortable. But again, anytime you take conscious hold of the breath, it's really great. And so because I work so much with trauma and regulating the nervous system, anytime we can extend our exhale longer than our inhale, we're bringing the nervous system down. And so, you know, that could be a 3-second inhale, 6-second exhale, and that's it. Or if you can feel your heartbeat, you know, inhale for 4 heartbeats and exhale for 8 heartbeats, or even box breathing is a really great one. I think they taught maybe Navy SEALs that or something, where it's a 4 count. So it's a 4 count in, 4 count hold, 4 count exhale, 4 count hold. And you just keep, it's like a box, a square, square breathing for 4 counts. And I mean, there's so much out there. What I tell most people that are just getting started with any sort of presence practice is that's what this is to me. It's all about just how do I get myself in the present moment and stop worrying about all the crazy things my head is doing right now.
Yeah.
Start with, 2 minutes or even 1 minute. Start with 8 breaths and see if you can just stay with your breath for 8 breaths. And if you make it, great, go about your day. Next day, try 12. There's a lot of, literature out there about, oh, you don't have time to meditate for 15 minutes, then you should meditate for 30, or, and I think a lot of people that doesn't make a lot of sense, which I understand.
Yeah.
But I think especially in our culture, it's always bigger, better, faster, right? If it's not 60 minutes of meditation every day, then it's not worth it. And it's like, to me, meditation, or the breath practice, really, it's about the breath, has become a daily moment by moment thing. I mean, I can be, taking my daughter to school and realize like, oh, I haven't actually paid attention to a breath for like an hour, and I'll take in a breath. And we're always one breath away from the present moment.
I love that.
Again, it's like you can at any point just go, oh, I can take a breath right now.
Yeah.
Oh, right. And it's so like funny. Bring yourself right back into the moment.
It's so funny you say that, because it's, with the muscular gentleman and it's all about how do we take care of our body, get the body and physique we need to live our best life. How do we get our health back? And I always say that. I say, look, you're one healthy meal away from getting back on track. You're one workout away from just getting right back on track. Like, it's not that far away, but what's cool is you just took that even a step further, and it goes right down to like, hey, why don't you just get in the present moment and take a breath? And it's that quick, right? It's a heartbeat to just get right back into getting that masculine edge back, getting your spatial awareness back. And that's huge for I think most of us, because I can tell you there's a lot of days I don't even think about my breath. But if I did, I think if I start taking those subtle moments instead of being like, well, I didn't meditate for an hour, that's okay. Just finding awareness is a starting point that can really change your life, to be honest.
Yeah. And there's a reason why so many of us don't want to take a breath and don't want to be in the present moment. I mentioned in the breath practice, it builds this charge and like all this stuff can come up, but really just that one breath, just being in the moment with whatever's happening for self, like that's kind of that scary place for a lot of people. It's a lot easier to distract, to, eat until you can't feel, to, zone out in your phone or zone out on TV or whatever it is. All of those things are a distraction from what is going on within. Right. And that's, talking about, again, back to masculinity, when we lean just over our edge, if we want to be better, Like, we have to look at these things. And the present moment can be really, really scary if we're carrying any sort of anxiety or trauma or anything, because as soon as I come in the present moment, now my body's gonna be like, oh, hey, here's this trauma you haven't looked at. You're present. Here it is.
Yeah.
And that's not always fun.
Yeah. No,
it's hard work.
It's funny. I did a podcast with Frank Rich, and he brought up cognitive dissonance, and this idea that, like, you're living a certain way that's not in alignment with where you want to go and what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
It's causing this tension, and it's almost slowing you down. Right. And I feel like that's exactly, I mean, what a cool way to create alignment with just breath work is stop running away from what you're so afraid of, and face it. And that's what the masculinity is about, right? The oak tree can't go run, right? The oak tree can't disappear from the storm, whatever that, it doesn't have to be the feminine, but the oak tree's sturdy, it's rooted, it's there. And that's part of what we have to do as men, is face some of these fears, or these, whatever we're trying to distract ourselves from looking at inside. Because it might be dark, it might be dirty and messy, but you know what? This is where we talked about at the beginning, the safeness. Like, you are safe. And that's why it's nice to have a therapist like you. I don't know what else is out there, but I have not once, but both sessions I did with you felt unsafe to just deal with it. I do want to say this, if you don't mind me talking for just a second. I did Nate's breath work, and you're in Denver, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So he does
Lakewood, but right outside of Denver. Yeah.
Okay. So he's right outside Denver, Lakewood. He does this online too. So, I definitely want you to share your information at the end of this podcast. Make sure people can find you, but you can do this online, right? Like, you can do.
So right now I'm doing individual sessions online. I don't have any online groups coming up currently, but that will probably change shortly.
So
I put on special events for that. I just don't have any on the calendar at the moment.
Okay. Well, and I find that, I did it online with you. I didn't find it much. Well, I didn't do it in person, but I don't see it being much different, right? Like, you're not going to lose out on much other than maybe just like hearing the music.
So what I find, so the music is a little different, but I don't take people as deep online. So the duration is shorter, more just because there's some very unique and interesting things that can start to happen when we engage in the breath this way. And I do find that it works very well online. It's great because people are in the comfort of their home, and they can, maybe go right to bed afterwards or take a nap or something if they feel like they need to. But I don't go quite as deep in the online platforms.
Well, so speaking from experience, when I did it the first time, my upper left trap, completely locked up. It was like there was a trigger there. I'm not sure exactly what was going on. I don't have any neck issues or shoulder issues following the session, so that was fine. My what I found so interesting is I couldn't stop laughing. And that's what showed up for me both times that I did it with you. I don't know what, I'm still, and I actually came to some really cool truths through this breath work already. But I find it fascinating to want to do it more and more, because there is a way of just digging into your soul a little bit and but I do know, I can tell you without a doubt, my ability to stay present has already gotten better from doing 2 breathwork sessions with you, but it was showing up as a weakness for me. And I found it hard with my kids. As an entrepreneur, my mind can just, and this, it can just go, right? But I can just tell you right now, I thoroughly enjoyed doing those sessions with you and finding that weakness in me. Learning to want to dig more into what was this laughter about. I know it had some stuff to do with my mom and some other things, so that was great. The other part was just the ability to just start getting more present. And that practice alone, I think, is so valuable. So thank you for letting me do that with you.
Absolutely.
To just, the listeners, it's going to be different for every single person. Like he said, I did not get an orgasm, but man, does it so powerful and so effective. It's worth doing 100% at least once, and then seeing where you want to take it. But yeah, I wanted to say that. Why don't we? I want to kind of segue here into the muscular gentleman. So Nate is one of the muscular gentlemen in the program, and one that I have found to have done a ton of work within a very short amount of time. Your body has actually transformed, your posture, the muscle growth already. There's so many things that have happened. Can you tell us, or just the audience, a little bit about your experience in the program?
Yeah. Oh man, it's been quite the journey. And there's been a couple of little speed bumps here and there, but I've done a lot of men's work over the last 10 years, and didn't grow up with a lot of really good masculine role models. In fact, quite a few very bad masculine role models, and steered away from a lot of what true masculinity would be, because I was kind of afraid of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I was seeing was really toxic behaviors. And that's it's kind of funny. I get triggered when I hear the word toxic masculinity, because I'm like, masculinity isn't toxic. There's toxic behavior.
Yeah.
There's toxic people, but masculinity is a really powerful thing when we embrace it, and when we're initiated into it, in the right way. And one of the things that I've always struggled with is, I played sports when I was younger. I got like fourth at state in high jump, and played varsity basketball, and I did some of those things, but muscle mass was never a part of that. Like, I was never able to actually lift weights and gain muscle in areas. And just so the listeners know, I'm 6'7", and I've always stayed right around 200 pounds as an adult, which is very thin for somebody with that frame. I noticed my chest. I've never been able to build muscle in my chest or my glutes. I have a lumbar low back anomaly that nobody's ever really been able to figure out or help me gain strength through. And so I had kind of just sort of let myself be like, all right, well, this is just what I'm stuck with. And that is not a masculine ideal, to just lay down and be like, all right, well, I guess this is what I was handed, so I'll deal with it. And I kind of reached this point in my spiritual journey and my relationship journey and my business, and where like things weren't working. I was losing a lot of energy. I was backing off my client load. I just I was having a hard time showing up in the way I wanted to show up. And I think part of that might have been my nutrition, my diet. I was vegan for about 3 years. And while I'm really glad that I did that and I went through that experience, I had to, for whatever my body was going through at that time. The muscular gentleman also got me to start eating animal protein again, which is really great. And almost overnight, I started, my energy started coming back. My virility started coming back. And within a very short amount of time, strength started showing up in ways I realized I could, those hours I had taken out of my schedule, I was able to put back in because I had energy again. And I think I started noticing differences in the way I looked within 3 or 4 weeks. Other people really started noticing after about 7 or 8 weeks. And now I am about a week away from finishing the initial 3-month period of this, and I have more muscle mass. Yeah, the initiation phase, and I have a lot more muscle mass than I ever thought I would have, especially my chest and my glutes. My wife, so I have. This is kind of silly, but I've always had to wear a belt, and for the last month, I haven't had to wear a belt because my butt actually holds my pants up. So I'm like, if that's all I get out of this, that's great. But that's not all I've gotten. There's been all of these other things, and so adding that strength and the nutrition piece, putting on weight. I'm at a weight that I've weighed before, but when I weighed this much 10 years ago, I was fat. And I think I'm right about 230 right now. So 6'7", 230, and I think about 12% body fat. I'm like, who is this guy that I keep seeing in the mirror? My friends don't even recognize me anymore. And I'm like, I'm still the same guy, but I'm really not. I'm so much stronger. I'm so much more grounded and rooted in who I am, what my mission is, how I show up. And yeah, man, it's been a pretty crazy journey the last 3 months, and I'm really excited to see where it continues.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Okay. So you literally, look, this show, the Muscular Gentleman Show, is about masculinity, sex, attraction. Let's talk about this a little bit if you're comfortable with it, because to me, look, every man I've ever talked to, they want quality, they want more sex, they want to be attractive for their spouse or their wife or woman, whatever. But the interesting thing is, so many men are just not doing the things that actually create attraction, or it's sometimes for men, it's so confusing because the feminine is so different than men. And because they don't know those differences, we keep showing up and creating issues for ourselves. Like, we're actually our own worst enemy when it comes to attraction and sex. Let's dive into that for a minute, because if you're still listening, this is the fun part, but it's the part of the Muscular Gentleman where I get the most just excited about, because relationships can change drastically within this program, just with the mindset shift, but also with what you start doing for your body and your health.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a specific question? We could go a lot of.
Started to bring up your butt and your belt and your wife, and I don't know where you were going with that, but then you dropped that.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, my wife keeps making comments about, like, oh, you're just so strong now, and look at those muscles. Yeah, I think she's grabbed my butt a few times, and I'm like, oh wow, there's muscle there, and I mean, not that she ever complained before, but like she's gone out of her way to let me know she likes what she sees, which has been really great. Sex has been a lot better, and it's funny. I've as part of my journey over the last 10 years, I've studied some tantric practices. I've studied some of the Taoist sex practices, and there's these exercises you can do to increase stamina and length and girth and all of these things, right? And so I've done a lot of that work over the years, and she and I have done some very intentional work for growing our communication, growing our intimacy, doing all of those things. And the last 3 months, while I've been doing all of that work for a few years, the last 3 months, I mean, it has been like light speed, warp speed through, like, oh man, I don't even know how to explain it. Yeah, attraction. Yeah. Just the presence in that space of intimacy has been just like beyond what I even thought was possible. I mean, there's spaces where I didn't even know what I was missing. I didn't even know what I didn't know. Sure. And without the strength, without the understanding of like how I need to show up in that present state of masculinity, like I never would have been able to even discover it. Right? Like it would have just been something that was completely out of, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Right.
No, I love that. And it's funny because I think too, masculinity is, look, this for every man listening, I'm going to give you a huge tip here. And I think you need to hold on to this.
Just the tip?
Here, just the tip. Here's the thing. You can read all the Tantra books, read the best sex, you'll see magazines like the #1 sex technique to wow her or whatever. None of those techniques matter. No toy, no like nothing, no blue pill. None of that matters if you're not bringing the masculine energy and presence to that woman. So if you want to create the best sex of your life, fast track it, like Nate just said, and just become more masculine. And this is what we do in the program. This is what we teach, right? Is how to become more masculine. But becoming more masculine is what creates the magnetism and the attraction that woman will just want to rip your clothes off. She'll stare at your butt. Like Nate was saying, my wife has commented on my butt. I can't even tell. It's funny because we think arms or like huge arms and abs and all these things. Those are great. But yeah, my woman too, she must be a butt woman, right? Like she will grab it and bring it up. Like it's a topic. And the workouts that I provide in the bus, they somehow seem to accentuate the glutes.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's a masculinity thing. It's like, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what you know, unless you're showing up, you know?
Yep. Yeah. And it's interesting because I didn't realize how I wasn't showing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I thought I was doing all the things that I was doing. It's like I didn't think there was more, right? It was like, well, I'm checking this box, I'm checking this box, I'm doing all these things.
Sure.
And there was this level of presence of that rootedness in the masculine. And I mean, I definitely found myself being falling into the emotional patterns and being swayed by that, being reactive. And that was probably one of the biggest shifts for me is being able to find that space of non-reactivity, because as soon as I can be non-reactive with my wife, like, she can go through whatever emotional process she needs to, she can rely on me to be that strength for her, and then she opens in ways that, like, and it's like I don't really have to do anything but stand there and listen.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing, but it takes courage and strength. It's like, it's really easy to be like, oh, I just sit there and do nothing, but no, you have to hold that space. So kind of all the way back to the beginning, we were talking about safety, right? It's like, it's that space that you hold. If you can sit there in the midst of the storm of that emotional conflict of whatever it is there, and you can stay rooted in that divine masculinity, in that presence, that non-reactivity, everything else just starts to show up. And that's why I got into the work that I do, because trauma, pain, anxiety, all of those things take away your ability to hold that present state, to hold that sacred space for self or for anybody else.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
I love that. That's so good. I'm gonna have to pull that for a clip. But truthfully, though, this is what's so interesting to me is, there's this. I don't know if you know much about the community out there of, like, the red pill. They talk about, like, being alpha and beta and all these different things. And it's funny. I find that if I've read into those forums, I've read into these different theories and all these things, and there's some truth to some of it. There's some, biological things happening and things like that. But when you just kind of take yourself out of, like, overthinking this whole process as men and just think, how do I become more masculine? It's as simple as that. We don't have to complicate this. But what's nice too, though, is, and I find, you going through the Muscular Gentleman program with me, I have found you have been one of the faster men in the program to reach levels of deeper masculine edge, I would say, than some of the others, because of this background that you have with the breath work and dealing with trauma in ways that maybe some of the men haven't. And I do find that interesting because it was like an accelerated process for you. You started seeing results pretty quickly. Even in our men's talks, about masculinity, when we talk about the feminine and, we talk about arguing and all these different things, it was like your ability to find or see yourself in those spaces and then almost look at it from an outside perspective and go, oh, I wasn't showing up there. Like, what was I thinking? Was really cool to watch, because a lot of men, I think I didn't do breathwork before, so maybe I did this slower than you, but thankfully I've been able to start seeing it more and more. But I do think that's really interesting, because I wonder if the breathwork made a difference for that kind of.
So I think it did in my healing process. So, like, even before coming into this, but what you're talking about, like, kind of being that observer of self, right? That's mindfulness. All right. So that's being willing to separate, like, who you are, like, who you really are, from the emotions, from the thought patterns, from the behavior patterns, from all the habituations of life, of being human and kind of living in this reality. So when we can start to observe self, like, everything starts to become a choice.
Yeah.
But there are many, many areas where people are unwilling to observe self. they want to blame, they want to be the victim, they want to not go into it for fear or whatever it might be. And so that is what I've been working on for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, and I mean, I've held men's groups and circles. And so all of this understanding of masculinity I have. And I think what's happened with the strength that I have gained in these last 3 months is it went from, I know it and I understand it cognitively, to, oh, now I actually see how to live it, because I have that inner strength to actually hold it and stay with it.
Right. I love that. And some of the gentlemen listening to this program, or the show, if some of this is so new to you or just different, a lot of times when Nate's talking about just being present, it doesn't have to be an argument with a woman. It could just be a numerous things, but women, the feminine energy, and this is where these other groups drive me crazy, because there seems to be this like resentment toward women and the feminine and this negative thing. Look, even, and Nate and I have talked about this. We started talking about this before I hit record, but like even feminism. Okay. I'm not going to waste my time, like we talked about, Nate and I did, being the victim of like all these things. That is completely, that a muscular gentleman, a masculine man can't be the victim. Okay. It's not in our cards. Okay. So sitting there and dogging on women and getting resentful over, whether they have used sex in the past with you, or if you've got trauma in the past with a woman, you got to let that go. And you got to move into a space where you are a man, and that masculinity is going to take you there. But moving forward from all that, when we can set ourselves up to be present in the masculine energy form for a woman, you're going to create a different way of living with that woman. Meaning there's attraction, there's magnetism, and she's constant. Look, the feminine does this. They're going to be testing you because they want to feel your strength. They want to feel your resiliency, your clarity, your focus. They want to feel these things with you because it allows them to fall more into their feminine. And Nate, and look, Nate, I'll let you talk about this because you know just as well as I do now. You know this. Talk a little bit about how women can be both. That's what men don't understand. Women can be masculine. They can put on that masculine mask real quick. If you want to speak to that.
I think it's important to understand, in all of these conversations that are happening right now around masculinity and femininity and all of that, it's like, first and foremost, we're all human.
Yep.
And we all have both of those ideals available to us, right? Like at any given point, I could go into the feminine if like there's a strong emotion coming up, or I need to surrender over to something, or whatever it is. It's like there's masculine and feminine energies available to us at any given time because we're human. We're all human, right? So if I'm born with these parts, I'm probably going to tend more toward one or the other, but it's still all available to us, right? And when we're talking about attraction, and this doesn't matter if it's a homosexual relationship, a lesbian relationship, it doesn't matter,
right?
If we're trying to create attraction, there has to be that polarization, and the only words we have right now are masculine and feminine, right? And so there are times when my wife is very masculine. She runs an international company for women, and she has to put on her masculine mask a lot. And one of the biggest issues that we were having is I'm a very easygoing person, and kind of go with the flow, which honestly is kind of a feminine expression. Not a bad thing, but it is on the scale of masculine and feminine, it would lean more toward the feminine side of things, of being that go with the flow, surrender kind of thing, being the ocean, the waves, right? More passive. And so I would just let her kind of take control of stuff, because I'm like, whatever. Oh, you're concerned about this thing. I don't really have an opinion on it. So if you want to be the boss of that, you go ahead.
Right.
And what had happened was it nurtured this relationship where we were really depolarized, and our sex life was suffering, our attraction was suffering. We were, a lot of times just kind of feeling like roommates. And to be honest, like I was pretty content. I was just like, whatever. I have a lot of trauma and things in my past, and I was like, I'm not in an abusive relationship. I'm, everything's fine. Whatever, right? Kind of being more of that feminine expression. allowance and as I actually remember a few years ago, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. Oh, it was during like right after the initial quarantine after COVID hit. I started getting more into the masculine expression and really what that looks like in regard to sex and intimacy. And I remember getting into this conversation with my wife about like, hey, I'm trying to step up more here and be more in this kind of masculine leadership, masculine presence. And here's what the feminine looks like. And she got so angry. Like we got in this really big argument over, you know, masculine and feminine dynamics. And she was like, I'm not going to be some passive wife, and I'm not going to be doing your laundry. And not that I asked her to do my laundry or any of those things,
right.
But it triggered her so much, which of course I now realize, like any of those emotional storms, like that's more of a feminine expression than masculine expression. But it kind of halted us for quite a long time. And we didn't have any of those kind of masculine feminine dynamic conversations again until a little more recently. It started before I started the Muscular Gentleman, but it's been a lot more since I started. But what's been cool is we actually haven't had to have those conversations as much because I've just shown up in the way I need to show up, and that allows her to show up in the way she needs to show up. So I had this really great example of something that happened just recently, the last couple of weeks, where I got to see this in action. My wife has she's dealt with depression and manic depressive tendencies. I'm never diagnosed, not medicated or anything, but that has been a cycle since we've been together. And it all, you know, every 3 or 4 months, it gets really, really dark for her. And our pattern has always been to start getting into more arguments. She gets a lot more critical, gets very blaming, gets very emotional, like crying and lack of sleep, and like all of these things snowball for her. And you know, for me, it's always been like, oh great, here we go, and I got to deal with this crap again. You know, God, maybe she should be medicated, maybe she should da da da, maybe all of these things. And I'm like, you know, why is she doing this to me? Why is she always blaming me for everything? Right, kind of going to that victim role.
Yep.
When it started this time, and so she just came out of this cycle. And when it started about a month ago, I recognized it immediately, and I continually just started showing up like, okay, I understand she's in this cycle. I understand her emotions are going to be, you know, really all over the place. She's going to need my support.
Yeah.
Not my blame.
Yep.
Not my weakness.
Not your victim mentality.
Not my victim mentality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And for probably the first time in the 10 years we've been together, she didn't go to blame.
Yes.
She didn't go to all these other things. In fact, she leaned on me in many situations in this, and we were able to navigate it and get through it in a way that was completely different and so supportive of each other. And I mean, I was shocked as we kind of came through it, and it's coupled with hormones and some other things too. But we actually had a conversation about that of like, hey, this is you know, you're in your cycle, and we are not ready to get divorced. like this is amazing, and I don't want to put that all on her.
No,
right?
no, absolutely.
It's not like her fault or
Sure.
her, right? But it's like it was a pattern of behavior she brought in that I wasn't able to deal with as a muscular gentleman, as a divine masculine energy. Yeah. And I was able to do that for her this time. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to do that every time now. Yeah, because it showed support, it showed intimacy, and it was something that I had never had modeled for me growing up or anything. So it was really great.
That's fantastic. I love that example. And what's so cool about that is that support that she was needing. You've said this before, I think in one of our coaching calls, you were like, man, I never realized that as a man, like it's my responsibility to show up in this masculine form. And it's funny because when we do, that's where they just get like, for her to lean against you, you know, you're the oak tree. She's just like laying into you and just like needing that from you. You just became such a high value man to her. Like your value just skyrocketed because all of a sudden this feeling of being able to trust you to rely on you. And that's the feminine, right? That's what they're dying for. But yeah, I'm sure you just went way high value. Your attraction went way, all these things just from that alone, not just the the newfound butt that you got and all these other things, but just showing up in that sense had to have been so powerful. So that's an amazing story. I love that. Yeah. This is fantastic. I feel like we're going to have to do a second show. Before I end this, please tell us where we can find you. How can we get a hold of you? If there's anything else you want to talk about, and let's end with that, because I want to make sure people can find you.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get in touch with me is through the website. It's my business called Somatic Synergies. So it's www.somaticsynergies.com. You can also go to nateewert.com. It points to the same place, just my name. I do individual sessions. I do Zoom sessions. We have group classes and workshops. I don't only work with men. I work with many different types of people. And I'm based in Lakewood, Colorado, just outside of Denver. And yeah, that's.
I will say that I know you said you don't just work with men, but what's really nice about this, and what's nice about Nate, is if you're listening to the show and you resonate with the masculine side, he's done the work. And what's cool is, as you're going through this, he really has an ability to be able to kind of help from that masculine side, which is really, I think, encouraging, because not only is it safe, but it's the language we're trying to pick up on and understand better,
Yeah. And I love working with men. I mean, I have men specific groups, and I've done some, like sacred masculine, divine masculine work with some private groups and things. And I love doing that work. In fact, just this last weekend, I spent the weekend with some men in some really deep, heartfelt work. Really opened up a whole lot for these guys and for me too. And it's, we really need, as men, we need to be able to rely on each other to be able to hold that space. We can't. It's not that we can't rely on our intimate partners for that, but it depolarizes, right? It takes away that attraction. We can't rely on them in the same way that they should rely on us.
100%.
Yeah,
it's different. Yep.
So that space is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, Nate. Well, thank you so much, man, for coming on the show, and this has been fun. I feel like we could continue for another hour.
Probably.
But yeah, don't ignore my texts when I try to bring you back on here.
I won't.
No, but thank you for your time, man. Yeah, we will see you guys soon.
You've been listening to The Muscular Gentleman. Finally, a podcast that's unapologetic for being a man. Thanks for joining us this week. Make sure you visit the website, www.themusculargentleman.com. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you like the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or just tell a buddy about the show. That would help too. Don't forget, Rustin is available for private coaching. Embrace your masculinity and live the life you've always wanted. See you next time on The Muscular Gentleman.